23. I thought I was protecting my pregnant wife. I was really silencing her. The night I understood what I had done, Rebecca was sitting on the edge of our bed with her hands folded over the round of her stomach, and she would not look at me. The lamp on the dresser had burned low. Outside, the April rain had softened to a slow tapping against the window, the kind of rain my father used to call a listening rain, because it made a man hear things he had spent the day ignoring. I was 31 years old. Rebecca was 26, and 7 months along with the child we had waited 4 years to carry. On the small table beside her lay a folded sheet of paper I had not yet read. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. And I, who had spent 8 months telling everyone in our district that I was protecting my wife, stood in the doorway of my own bedroom and could not make myself step inside. I will tell you what was on that paper before this story ends. I will tell you why Rebecca would not speak, and why the bishop's wife had come to our kitchen earlier that evening and left without drinking the coffee I poured her. I will tell you what I did the next morning and what I did not do, and which of those things I still cannot forgive. But to explain why I was standing in that doorway, unable to cross a floor I had crossed 10,000 times, I have to go back to the autumn before, to a Sunday in October when Rebecca first told me she was carrying our child. We lived in a small district in northern Indiana, in a white house my grandfather had built with his brothers in 1948. Rebecca and I had married late by the standards of our community. She had been 22, I had been 27, and for 4 years after the wedding our house had stayed quiet in a way that made the women at church glance at her stomach and then quickly look away. Rebecca bore those glances the way she bore everything else, with a straight back and a soft voice and a steadiness that I mistook, for a long time, for peace. That Sunday in October, she waited until I had unhitched the buggy and come into the kitchen. She was standing at the stove with her back to me, stirring nothing in particular, and she said, without turning, "Joseph, the Lord has answered." That was all. I crossed the room and put my hands on her shoulders, and when she finally turned, her face was wet, and she was smiling in a way I had not seen since the first year of our marriage. I told her I would take care of her. I told her she would not have to lift a single heavy thing for the next 9 months. I told her I would protect her and the child with everything I had. I meant it. That is the part I need you to understand before I tell you the rest. I meant every word. The first decision I made was a small one. Rebecca had been helping her younger sister Hannah with the canning that fall, walking the half-mile down the road 3 or 4 times a week, and I told her she should rest instead. Hannah could come to our kitchen, I said. There was no need for Rebecca to be on the road. Rebecca tilted her head and looked at me for a moment longer than I expected, and then she nodded. "All right, Joseph," she said, "if you think it best." Hannah came twice, and then her mother needed her at home, and then the canning was finished, and Rebecca did not see her sister again until Christmas. I did not notice that at the time. I noticed it later. The second decision came in November. Rebecca had always written letters. Her mother's family had moved to Ohio years before, and she kept up with 2 cousins and an aunt through long, careful letters she wrote on Sunday afternoons. One evening I came in from the barn and found her at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes, and she looked tired. I told her she should not strain her eyes by lamplight in her condition. I told her I would mail her letters for her, and that she should rest. She thanked me. She handed me the envelopes. I put them in my coat pocket, and 3 of them I mailed, and one of them, the one to her aunt in Millersburg. I forgot, and then I found it again 2 weeks later, and by then it seemed foolish to send a letter so late, and I tucked it into the drawer of my desk in the barn office, and told myself I would mention it to her, and I did not. I want to be honest, I did not forget that letter. I had read the address and seen that it was going to her Aunt Miriam, and Miriam was the one person in Rebecca's family who had ever told her, out loud, that she did not have to agree with everything I said. I had heard Miriam say it at our wedding dinner, in a voice meant only for Rebecca, and I had carried that sentence in me for 4 years like a small stone in my shoe. When I put that letter in the drawer, I told myself it was an accident. It was not. That was the first stone in the wall I built around my wife. I did not see it as a wall. I saw it as a hand cupped around a candle. By December, Rebecca was beginning to show, and the women at church were kind to her in the way our women are kind, which is to say, they brought casseroles and asked about her health and offered advice she had not requested. One of them, Sarah Yoder, was a midwife. She had delivered most of the babies in our district for 20 years, and Rebecca trusted her. After service one Sunday, Sarah took Rebecca aside and spoke with her for a long time near the buggies, and when Rebecca came back to me, her face was lit up in a way I did not like. I asked her what they had spoken about. She said Sarah had offered to come to the house once a month, then once every 2 weeks, then weekly as the time grew nearer, to check on her and the baby. I told Rebecca I would think about it. That night I told her I did not think it was necessary. We were a healthy family. Her mother had borne 9 children without a midwife visiting the house. The bishop's wife had told me, in passing, that some of these younger midwives asked too many questions and made women anxious about things that were in God's hands. I said all of this calmly, the way my father had spoken to my mother, and Rebecca listened, and at the end she said, "All right, Joseph, if you think it best." She did not argue. She almost never argued. I took her quiet as agreement. I know now it was something else. Sarah Yoder came to the house once, in January, and I met her at the door. I told her, politely, that Rebecca was resting, and that we appreciated her concern, and that we would send for her when the time came. I did not let her pass the porch. Rebecca was upstairs. She heard the whole conversation. When I came up to the bedroom afterward, she was sitting in the rocking chair by the window, with her hands folded over her stomach, and she would not look at me. That was the first time. I should have understood what that meant. I told myself she was tired. In February, the bishop visited. He sat at our kitchen table and drank coffee and praised me for the way I was caring for Rebecca. He said a husband's first duty, in a time like this, was to keep his wife's mind quiet. Worry, he said, traveled from a mother to a child. A peaceful woman bore a peaceful child. He looked at Rebecca when he said it, and Rebecca nodded, and I sat up a little straighter in my chair, because I felt that I was being seen as the kind of man my father had been, the kind of man I had always wanted to be. After the bishop left, Rebecca cleared the cups without speaking. I asked her if she felt all right. She said yes. She went upstairs early. I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time that night. Something in me felt off, the way a barn feels off when an animal has gotten out, and you have not yet realized which stall is empty. But I could not name it, and so I let it go. In March, Rebecca's mother came to visit. She was a small, quiet woman who had borne 9 children and buried 2 of them, and she sat in our front room with Rebecca for nearly an hour while I worked in the barn. When I came in for the noon meal, her mother was putting on her coat to leave, and her eyes were red. She looked at me as she passed, and she said, in a voice so low I almost missed it, "Joseph, let her speak." That was all. She would not stay for the meal. She walked the 2 miles back to her own house in the cold, and Rebecca stood at the window watching her go, with one hand pressed flat against the glass. I asked Rebecca what her mother had meant. Rebecca said she did not know. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I went back out to the barn and split wood until my hands were numb, and I did not think about it again for 3 weeks. Here is what I did not know then, and what I came to understand later, in pieces, the way a man understands a flood only after the water has gone down. Rebecca had been trying to tell me, since November, that something was wrong, not with the baby, with her. She had been having dreams she could not shake. She had been waking in the night with her heart pounding, and a weight on her chest that had nothing to do with the child she carried. She had wanted to talk to her sister Hannah. She had wanted to write to her Aunt Miriam. She had wanted Sarah Yoder to sit with her in the afternoons and ask her how she felt, not only how the baby moved. She had wanted her mother to stay for the noon meal. She had wanted, more than anything, to say out loud the things she had carried since she was a girl of 14, the thing that had come back to her in the dark when her body began to change. I had taken every one of those doors and closed it, gently, lovingly. With the patience of a man cupping his hand around a candle, and the candle, of course, had gone out. I did not know any of that on the night I am telling you about, the night in April when I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and could not step inside. I knew only what had happened earlier that evening, when the bishop's wife, Anna, had come to our kitchen unannounced. Anna was a thin woman in her 60s, with hands that were always cold. She came in without knocking, which was not her habit, and she asked to see Rebecca, and I told her Rebecca was resting. Anna looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Joseph, I am not here for you." She walked past me, up the stairs, and into our bedroom, and she closed the door behind her. I stood in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee I had poured out of habit, and I listened to the murmur of 2 women's voices through the floor, and I could not make out a single word. Anna came down 40 minutes later. Her eyes were wet. She did not sit. She did not drink the coffee. She stood in the middle of our kitchen and she said, "Joseph, your wife has been asking for help since November. I did not know until tonight. I am sorry I did not come sooner." Then she put on her coat and she walked out into the rain. And I stood in my kitchen holding 2 cups of cooling coffee, and I did not understand, yet, what she had said. I went upstairs. Rebecca was sitting on the edge of the bed. The lamp on the dresser had burned low. On the small table beside her lay a folded sheet of paper. She would not look at me. I asked her what Anna had said. She did not answer. I asked her what was on the paper. She did not answer. I crossed the room then, finally, and I picked up the paper, and I unfolded it, and I read it. It was a letter, in Rebecca's hand, dated November of the previous year. It was addressed to her Aunt Miriam. It was the letter I had put in my drawer in the barn office and never mailed. Anna had brought it to her. I do not know to this day how Anna had come to possess it, although I have my suspicions, and they involve a barn hand who came and went that winter and who, I think now, saw more of me than I saw of myself. The letter was 4 pages long. In it, Rebecca told her aunt that she was carrying a child, and that she was glad, and that she was also afraid, because when she was 14 years old, a man in their old district had done something to her that she had never spoken of to anyone, and the memory of it had come back to her now, with the changes in her body, and she did not know how to carry both the child and the memory at the same time. She wrote that she had tried to speak to her husband, but that her husband had become very careful with her, and very protective, and that every time she opened her mouth to say a hard thing, he answered before she had finished, and the hard thing went back down inside her. She wrote that she felt she was disappearing. She wrote that she was writing to Miriam because Miriam had once told her she did not have to agree with everything her husband said. She wrote that she needed someone to ask her a question and wait for the answer. I read the letter twice. I sat down on the floor at the foot of our bed because my legs would not hold me, and I read it a 3rd time. Rebecca finally spoke. She said very quietly, "I did not know you had it." That was all. She did not accuse me. She did not weep. She put her hand over her stomach, and she looked at the wall, and she said it again. "I did not know you had it. I want to tell you that I did the right thing that night. I want to tell you that I knelt at her feet and asked her forgiveness, and that I went the next morning to Sarah Yoder's house and brought her back, and to Rebecca's mother and brought her too, and to Hannah, and to Miriam in Ohio, by way of the telephone in the shed at the end of the road. I want to tell you that I sat in our kitchen for the next 2 months and let my wife speak, and that I learned, finally, how to listen. Some of those things I did, not all of them, not soon enough. That night I asked Rebecca to forgive me, and she did not answer. I do not think she could. She lay down on her side, facing the wall, and I sat on the floor at the foot of the bed until the lamp went out, and then I sat in the dark and I understood, for the first time, what I had done. I had thought I was protecting my pregnant wife. I had told myself that every closed door, every unsent letter, every midwife turned away on the porch, every visit cut short, every conversation I finished for her was a hand cupped around a candle. But a hand cupped too tightly around a candle does not protect the flame. It smothers it. I had not been protecting Rebecca. I had been silencing her. And the worst part, the part I have carried for 38 years, is that I had not done it out of cruelty. I had done it out of love, which is a thing I had been taught to confuse with control, by my father and by his father, and by every man who sat in our kitchen and praised me for keeping my wife's mind quiet. The next morning I walked to Sarah Yoder's house in the rain. I asked her to come. She came. She sat with Rebecca for 3 hours that first day, and many hours after. I drove Rebecca to her mother's house and left her there for a week, because she asked me to, and her mother did not say a word to me when I came to bring her home, only nodded once at the doorway, and that nod was the closest thing to forgiveness I received from that woman before she died. Our son was born in June. Rebecca named him Samuel, which means heard of God. She told me, the day we brought him home, that she had chosen the name for herself, not for him. I understood. I did not argue. I had learned, finally, not to answer before she had finished. Rebecca lived another 31 years. We had 2 more children after Samuel, both daughters. She wrote to her Aunt Miriam every month until Miriam died in 1994. She and Sarah Yoder became close friends, and Sarah delivered both our daughters in our own bedroom, with the windows open. Rebecca spoke more and more as the years went on, although there were things she carried that she never said aloud to me. And I came to accept that some doors I had closed in that first winter never fully opened again. She died 4 years ago, in the spring, of a cancer that took her quickly. The night before she died, she asked me to bring her the wooden box from the top shelf of our bedroom closet. Inside it was the letter, the one I had not mailed. She had kept it all those years. She handed it to me, and she said, "Joseph, burn this." I do not want the children to find it. I took it out to the stove and I burned it. When I came back to the bedroom, she was asleep, and she did not wake again. I am 69 years old now. I live alone in the house my grandfather built. Samuel farms the back 40. The girls live in Ohio, both of them, near where Miriam used to live. I sit in the kitchen in the evenings and I think about that night in April, the lamp burning low, the listening rain, my wife on the edge of the bed with her hands folded over our unborn son. I think about how long it took me to cross that floor. I think about every door I closed, gently, lovingly, in the months before. I tell this now because Samuel's wife is carrying their first child, and last Sunday after service, Samuel pulled me aside and asked me, quietly, if I had any advice for him. He is a good man. He is gentler than I was. But he is my son, and he was raised in this house, and I know how easily a hand can close around a flame without meaning to. I told him only this. I told him that when his wife begins to speak, he must not answer until she is finished. Not even kindly, not even to agree. He must let the silence after her words be long enough for her to add what she did not yet know she needed to say. I told him that protection is not the same as quiet. I told him that the worst things I ever did to his mother, I did while believing I loved her, and that love without listening is only another word for keeping. He nodded. He did not understand. Fully. He will, in time. I hope he understands sooner than I did. I hope the rain that teaches him is a softer rain than mine.